So who is the Synagogue of Satan? Really, truly, the Synagogue of Satan? I'll tell you one thing. It's not people pretending to be Jews, because Jews didn't exist in the Bible, and they didn't exist in the time of Jesus. Judaism was created between 300 to 600 AD. Rabbinical Judaism to Talmudic Judaism to Kabbalah Judaism, and the mesh of all of it as we know it today. So in the time of Jesus, what was Jesus talking about? Well, if you look at an English translation of the Bible, a King James version, we'll start with King James of Revelation 2:9 and Revelation 3:9, where it talks about the Synagogue of Satan. It says, those who pretend to be Jews, but they are not. That's what it says in English. But was the Bible written in English? Did Jesus speak English? Did the writers of any of the books of the Bible speak English? Absolutely not. They weren't talking about the Jews. And this is how so many Christians are deceived, because they read it in English and they're like, well, God said this. God didn't say that, bro. Some asshole who translated the English said that. Now, this is why this is so important. It's probably the most important Bible lesson you've never gotten if you're a Christian, or if you just want to know more about the Bible in general and Jesus. The Bible was written in two different main languages. So the Old Testament was written in Canaanite, and differing dialects of Canaanite over the course of the period of time that the Old Testament was written. And then the New Testament was exclusively written in Koine Greek. Every book, Koine Greek. The only difference is that there was a couple different, names, proper names, like names for people, and then towns, places, and things that were put in Aramaic, because Jesus also spoke Aramaic and Koine Greek. And then Canaanite, because of course we're telling stories about that land that goes back, it's still the lands of Canaan at the time of Jesus. So there was a lot of towns, names, places, and things that were written in Canaanite, right? So if you go back to the original writings of, let's say, Revelation 2:9 and 3:9, where it talks about the Synagogue of Satan, well, then what you'll see is that, and it didn't say Jew, it said Iudeus or Udeus, depending on how you pronounce the Greek. Well, you're like, well, Matt, what's that mean? It means, it was the word for the tribe of Judah, right? That was what Jesus was saying, my tribe, my people, or God's former chosen people, because Jesus came from the bloodline, he came from the tribes, right, of God's chosen. And that's why if you go back to the Old Testament, every book listed out the bloodlines. You had to be in the family tree or you were not chosen. There was no such thing as converting to God's chosen people. It was a birthright. It was a lineage. It was a bloodline, right? So when Jesus was saying Udeus in Greek, he was saying Judah, the Judeans, my people. He wasn't saying Jews. Jews didn't exist yet. Now, why would people, when they wrote the Bible in English, then replace it with Jews? Well, there's a lot of reasons. It could be nefarious, like they're trying to deceive you and trick you. It could just be, well, they're stupid, and those people, let's call them Jews. Could just be what their dad told them, or their pastor told them, or who knows, or just over time. But Jesus didn't know who Jews were at that time, because you only had the 12 tribes of Canaan at that time, and Jesus came from the tribe of Judah. And the Pharisees, another tribe, was a tribe that had Jesus killed, or had the Romans killed Jesus. And what were the Pharisees doing? Well, the Pharisees were the ones that were, doing money changing in the temple and in God's house. They were the ones that were, teaching and preaching and worshiping in ways outside of the teachings and practices of the Old Testament. They were the ones who were doing the child sacrifice and the idolatry and all of the heathenistic and the sadistic things. That's what Jesus was doing. He was standing up against them, preaching against them, calling them out for their lies, their sins, and their immoralities. Right? So we don't know, after the exile of, the Jews from Babylon, or excuse me, not the Jews, the tribes of Canaan from Babylon in 70 AD, we don't really know where they went. But we do know that there was one tribe that was doing a lot of evil stuff, worshiping Baal, child sacrifice. And so, guys, another thing that's very misconstrued, and I've broken this down a couple different times, but Baal was the god that they worshipped. Moloch is the act of sacrifice, right? Now, a lot of writings will put Moloch as a different god. That's not true. Moloch is an act of sacrifice. Look it up. Go back to the original writings, and you'll see that Moloch was the act of sacrifice, or child sacrifice, and that Baal was the god that they were Moloching to. So all these things are important to understand, so you're not deceived, so that you're not lied to. Because we as Christians believe that Hebrew was around in the Bible days, that Jews were around in the Bible days, that Jews were the ones who killed Jesus, and that Jews did this, and Jews that, and Jews were the chosen people, and Jew. It's not true. Those are the lies they tell you because the translations. So the Bible, originally written in Canaanite and Koine Greek, was then translated into Latin. Most Christians don't even know when. Emperor Constantine I, in the Roman Empire, was the one who created Christianity, the religion. Because there were people going around preaching about the Jesus, and there were churches and there were followings, because hundreds of years passed between the death of Jesus to Constantine. But what Constantine did is he said, hey, I see all these teachings, all these preachings, all this talk of this Jesus guy. He won a battle and he saw a cross in the sky, and he said, I'm going to create a religion about this Jesus guy. So he brought everyone together, and he turned pagan priests into early Christian priests, and he said, create me a Christian religion that I will legalize and make it a legal religion for the Roman Empire. And then Constantine ordered the first Council of Nicaea, where they created the first Bible. And when this Bible was being created, it was the first canon of the first Bible. They were picking and choosing. Man was picking and choosing which books, which translations, how these would be translated to go into this Bible, because everything was being translated at that point from Canaanite and from Koine Greek into Latin, which was the language that the Roman people spoke. So once it was translated to Latin, that's when everything started to change. Everything started to take hold. The nuances in translation and names and things. Now, and then how do we get to English? Well, first it had to be translated to French, and then from Latin to French, and then from French to eventually English. Now you're like, well, Matt, well, it can't be that different. Well, how can it not? Because there's so many different nuances. In our English Bible today, it says Jew, when Jesus never said Jew. And when you see that word, you believe that Jesus was talking about a Jew, curly hair, big nose, Torah, flag of Israel, all these things. That's what you believe Jesus was talking about. That's not what Jesus said. Jesus was talking about his tribe, the Judeans, the tribe of Judah. Right? See how big just one word can throw off not just what Jesus meant, but what Christians believe. Because Jesus said that so many times, a lot of Christians, when the false translation, look at the Jews as God's chosen people. They support Israel. They worship Israel. They say, hey, they can get away with that genocide. They can get away with all these things because they're God's chosen and we're less than. All from that one word being mistranslated. Do you not see how powerful this can be? What about a verse in the Bible what about a thou shalt not? What's the difference between thou shalt not murder or thou shalt not kill? Think about it. If Jesus said, if God said at that time, thou shalt not kill, we got a problem. But if God said, well, thou shalt not murder, well then, okay, all right, we're good. I haven't murdered anybody, but, killed some people. Think about it. These little nuances in translation can not only just change your beliefs, they can change an entire religion, an entire faith. So if you really want to learn Christianity, if you really want to understand what it means to follow Jesus, what it means to be a believer, and just understand all the bullshit that's going on right now, because it's not Democrat versus Republican, it's good versus evil. We are in the battle of good versus evil. So if you want to understand how to navigate that, then you better go back and understand what Jesus said. Not what the Jews told you Jesus said. Because almost every translation of the Bible today, in some way, shape, form, or fashion, comes from a Jewish-owned publishing company or a Jewish-owned publisher. It's the truth. So you cannot find Israel in the Bible before 1913 And the only way you can find it in the Bible before 1913 is in reference to Jacob, he who wrestled with God and was given the name Israel. And then a slaying that was given to his people were the Israelites, or the descendants of Jacob, the Israelites. You'll never find it called a land until 1913, Schofield Study Bible, funded by Lord Rothschild. We have been lied to about everything, and it's past time you start learning the truth and learning who Jesus really was and really is and what Jesus really said.